Kazinga Channel, mid-morning. The first call came from a passing fisher who saw something large pressed into the bank's curve just north of the inlet. When the rangers arrived, it was already clear this wasn't a simple slip. A young bull elephant lay pinned half sideways in the mud trench, one rear leg trapped beneath his body, the other bent at an unnatural angle. Only his eye moved, slow, sticky blinks through a coat of wet clay that masked everything else. His trunk was limp in the water. If the current lifted again, even slightly, he would go under before he could shift. The soil had caved beneath him. The bank here was soft, steep, and freshly soaked from last night's rain. There were signs he'd tried to climb out, long drag lines above his back, the trunk of a small tree snapped clean. But now he had gone still. His full weight sunk into a shelf of muck barely higher than the river line. The water lapped near his lower jaw. Another half hour, and it would be in his mouth. Ranger Musa was first down the slope. He didn't shout, didn't signal for gear. He crouched and watched the elephant's breathing. One slow, shallow rise every 15 seconds. He counted. Then I did it again. The bull didn't panic. He was exhausted. Quiet exhaustion was worse. It meant he'd stopped fighting. If they didn't act now, the body would stiffen in place and he would drown without a sound. 2 more rangers came with ropes. Musa waved them back. He approached slowly, not from the head, but behind, skirting the narrow ledge until he reached the higher ground where the elephant's flank met dry earth. He could see where the leg had twisted under. Not broken yet, but badly folded. He would need to be pulled free, not forced. Any pressure on that leg and the joint might lock. Musa stepped close enough to touch the bull's back. The skin was cold. He pressed gently with one hand and felt the shift. A breath in. The eye blinked again. He wasn't unconscious, just waiting. The trunk twitched slightly in the water, enough to show he still had strength, but not enough to move himself. If they left him here even an hour, the next river swell would take him. If they rushed the pull, they'd tear muscle or worse. He backed away and signaled. Ropes were passed down. One would go under the chest, the other across the rear above the sunken leg. No winch, no shouting, just pressure in unison. The men lined up at the rope's end, 5 steps up the slope, bare feet in dry sand. Musa knotted the first rope beneath the thick skin above the foreleg, looping twice to spread the pull. Then he stood and raised one hand. They pulled. Nothing moved. Again. The rope cut deeper into mud, and the elephant's body rocked, barely, a half-inch shift. But then the suction gave. A loud squelch, deep and thick. His chest rose free. His head turned slightly. His mouth cleared the waterline. He breathed. Just once. But it was air. That was the only thing that mattered. They paused, not to celebrate, to wait. Musa dropped to his knees again, placing a hand just behind the elephant's shoulder. The body was still heavy, sunken at the hip, but the chest had lifted. There was time now. Not much, but enough. The river edge churned softly beside them. The current hadn't risen yet, but the bank beneath them was loosening. The next move had to be cleaner. They would try again. 1 pull. Then reassess. If they moved too fast, they'd tear his side open. If they waited, the bank would fall away beneath all of them. If they failed now, he would not rise again. Musa stayed low, one knee in the clay, his palm resting gently on the elephant's side. The bull didn't flinch. His breath came slow and thin, a faint mist rising from one cracked nostril. Around them, the slope was crumbling grain by grain, loosened by the last pull. A few gulls wheeled above, but did not land. The river had stilled for now, but the lull would not last. Musa leaned in closer, not to inspect, just to speak. "We're here," he whispered. "Easy now. You're not alone." The elephant didn't respond with sound, but a slight lift in the chest gave enough. It was not surrender. It was permission. Musa signaled again, fingers flat. Another ranger passed down a length of woven rope, looped wide and stiff with river silt. They didn't rush. Any sudden contact near the ears or trunk might send the bull into a panic. He was strong enough to thrash once, and if he did, it could break his own spine against the slope. Musa moved with calm weight, laying the rope flat across the shoulder, then slowly tucking it beneath the chest with a wooden pole. The rope slipped under the massive frame without resistance. The bull moaned, a deep, trembling sound that rose and broke apart, but he did not thrash. He blinked and remained still. It was the only answer they needed. 2 more rangers took up the rope on the high ground. No one shouted, no one counted, just soft breath and a single nod from Musa. The pull came slow, not jerking, not strained. The rope stretched, groaned, and tightened across the elephant's ribs. His body shifted half an inch, then another, but the rear leg stayed lodged, trapped deep beneath him, bent like it no longer belonged. Musa pressed his hand against the exposed flank. The skin there was warmer now, still slick with mud, but not cold. Blood had begun circulating again. That meant time was still on their side, but not forever. If the pressure on the twisted leg increased, it would snap or dislocate. If they stopped now, he might sink again before they tried the next pull. They needed to create space. Not lift, not free. Just shift enough that air could pass easier through the lungs, and the water couldn't lap at his mouth. The second rope was passed down, a broader line with more give. This one would go around the lower abdomen. Musa looped it gently, speaking in low tones all the while. The elephant's eyes followed nothing, but the trunk curled slightly toward Musa's boot. Not in warning, just searching. Another breath, then another, shallow still but faster than before. The team pulled again, a slow lean. The slope above them trembled, but the bull shifted forward another few inches. His leg, still trapped, dragged with him. Not freed, but not locked. The suction began to break. The bull groaned again, louder now and longer. His trunk curled toward his body, brushing mud from his own chest with effort. Musa watched the motion closely. This wasn't panic. It was a sign. The elephant had enough will left to try. The men paused. Let him settle. Let his body speak. What came next would have to be precise. A full release of the leg might cause it to tear. But leaving it too long meant losing muscle function altogether. The next decision would matter more than any rope. One wrong pull, and the damage could become permanent. One misstep, and he would collapse under his own weight if he stood. If they failed again, he would survive the mud but never walk. And that, Musa knew, would be no rescue at all. The third pull brought him forward with a heavy slide, a long, wet drag of skin and bone across clay. His side cleared the trench. The ropes went slack. His front legs folded beneath him like broken scaffolds, splayed but free. For a moment, the weight of his own release held him down. Then, silence. No movement, no breath. His trunk lay coiled and still. His ears hung low and motionless. From above, one of the rangers shifted his stance, but Musa raised a hand, not to stop him from moving, but to hold the quiet. Something in the silence felt unfinished, the kind of pause that didn't mean the end, but waiting. Musa stepped forward again, slowly, and lowered himself beside the elephant's shoulder. The skin was soaked and streaked, but the curve of the ribs was more visible now. No rise, no fall. The chest had stopped moving. One eye was partly open, glazed with mud and dull against the sun. His mouth had fallen slightly open, exposing the gray softness of his tongue, unmoving. One of the younger rangers whispered, "Is he?" "No," Musa said, pressing a hand to the thick hide behind the front leg. "He's not gone. He's waiting." His palm stayed there, steady, feeling for the smallest pressure. Nothing at first, but then a tremor. A twitch beneath the skin, a muscle contracting deep inside. Not reflex, a beginning. Musa leaned closer and closed his eyes for just a breath. There it was again. A slow push outward, a single breath. So faint it didn't stir the dust. But it was enough. The team stood still. No one moved to pull the ropes again. The elephant's body remained in the shape it had collapsed into. Legs splayed, spine low, head turned slightly toward the slope. But his trunk curled inward, just slightly. Not lifted, not active, just a subtle shift, like reaching in sleep. Musa leaned back on his heels and exhaled. "He's conserving," he said quietly. "Not finished." They had moved him far enough to breathe. That was all they needed today. He would not stand now. Forcing him would end the chance. The leg was still pinned beneath his full weight. His muscles were failing from shock, but he was no longer in the river. That changed everything. Now, stillness wasn't death. It was a decision. Recovery would come in moments, small ones, not in a surge. One ranger fetched a canvas sheet, laid it near the trunk to shield his face from the sun. Musa wiped a line of dried mud from under the eye. Still no blink, but the nostrils flared. Barely. A hint of dust lifted. He was breathing again. If the heat stayed low and his heart held steady, there would be time to plan. Time to let his body repair what the river had taken. But not if anyone moved wrong. Not if fear rushed the next step. If they left him, he might stiffen and collapse. If they acted too fast, he might rise and fall again. Harder this time. The safest thing now was the hardest thing. Wait with him, watch for breath, and listen. The clouds came without wind. At first, only a shadow passed across the slope, cooling the bank where the bull lay motionless. Then came the first drop, fat, dark, slow, striking the sheet stretched near his face with a soft pat. Musa didn't move, neither did the others. But when the second drop fell, then the third, the team began covering what they could. One unrolled a tarp, another dragged a makeshift cloth between two poles above the elephant's spine. The earth darkened around them, drinking the sky. Within minutes, the rain deepened. A steady rhythm against the mud, against skin, against the silent hush that had hovered since the last pull. The elephant had not moved in over an hour. His chest had risen 3 times, but the breath was shallow. The rear leg remained trapped beneath him. His trunk lay slack across a stone, the tip curled downward. The slope around him, once holding firm, began to bleed sideways. The Kazinga channel thickened. Rain rolled down from the escarpment ridge above, feeding the inlet's edges. The waterline crept higher, a slow but unmistakable reach. Another 10 inches, and it would soak the bull's lower half again. Not violently, just enough to chill, and enough to take breath away from muscles already on the edge of collapse. Musa knelt again, wiping fresh rain from the elephant's side. The skin was slick and steaming under the downpour. He leaned close and whispered something too soft to hear. A few of the younger rangers looked away. The waiting was beginning to feel like helplessness. Then, movement. Small, brief, but unmistakable. The rear leg, the one pinned and folded, trembled once. A twitch along the haunch, not spasm, not reflex, a deliberate attempt. The muscle engaged, released, then again, just enough to shift the weight along his lower side. Musa's eyes snapped to the trunk. It lifted. Only slightly, barely an inch off the stone, but it lifted. Hung there, hovering, then dropped again with a soft slap. And with it, a breath. Audible now. Rough, through the rain. One ear twitched. A groan, not loud, not pained, rolled up from the chest, thin and broken. But it was sound. The team didn't cheer. No one spoke, but every man straightened. Musa placed his hand to the chest again. This time, the ribs rose stronger. Not steady, but climbing. The elephant was not gone. He was not slipping. he was returning. The rain ran over his body, streaking away clay and blood. His eye, still half glazed, blinked once, then shut completely. Not in retreat, in choice. The bull was beginning to reset, to gather something invisible beneath the surface. Another leg moved, this time the foreleg folded and adjusted, inching beneath the bulk of his weight. The slope shifted beneath him, mud giving way in small cracks. If he stood too soon, the leg might give. If the river reached him again, the cold might take that breath away. Musa motioned for the team to hold position. Everything now depended on timing. Not muscle, not will, just timing. If they acted too fast, the storm would undo it all. If they waited long enough, he might just rise, not because they pulled, but because he chose to. The rain eased by dawn, leaving behind a silver film over the water and mist curling low across the Kazinga Channel. The land was soaked and quiet. The bull had not stood, but he had not slipped either. His breath had deepened through the night, ragged, uneven but steady. A pulse now ran visibly beneath the skin along his flank. His trunk rested curled near his jaw, no longer limp. Musa sat nearby, arms folded across his knees, watching not for motion now, but for signs of choice, any small act the elephant made not to survive, but to return. Then, from beyond the far bank, something shifted. At first, only the sound came, a soft rustle in the reeds. Then, barely visible through the rising mist, dark shapes, 1, then 2, then 5. A slow-moving line, gray against gray, almost ghostly in the half-light. They did not trumpet, did not rush. They moved with purpose but without alarm. A herd. Musa stood quietly, shielding his eyes. The others froze behind him. One of the shapes, larger than the rest, stepped forward. Her ears lifted. She paused at the edge of the water, facing the slope where the young bull lay. No sound passed between them for several moments. Then she spoke. A single trumpet, low and long. It vibrated through the mist, the bank, the trees beyond. Not sharp, no warning. It was a call. One not of panic, but presence. She was letting him know. The bull stirred, his head lifted. Slowly, shakily, but it rose from the mud. His ears shifted backward, folding slightly. His eyes opened, wide now, no longer dulled. And then, one breath. Deep, wet, shuddering, but full. His chest expanded with it, and his trunk lifted an inch before falling again with soft weight. The herd didn't move closer. They waited. A smaller elephant, barely more than a calf, stepped to the matriarch's side. She leaned gently into him. Behind them, the fog began to rise, but the herd held its shape, unmoving, unwavering. Musa knelt again, whispering softly. The bull didn't respond to him this time. He watched the herd. His eyes stayed fixed on the other side of the channel, and each slow breath came with new force. His legs, though folded beneath him, shifted slightly, preparing. Not for flight, for alignment. He knew them. Whether by scent or sound or something deeper, he recognized what stood across from him. His body had not yet returned, but his sense had. The rangers remained still. If they moved too soon, if they touched him now, it might undo the thread he had picked up in the fog. For the first time in 2 days, he was not watching his rescuers. He was listening on his own. What came next would not be a rescue. It would be a reunion. If he had the strength to stand, he would go. If he didn't, they would leave. That was the wild's way, not cruel. Just true. But Musa knew, from the way his breath grew louder, from the way his eye no longer closed. The decision was forming. And it will come soon. The sun rose thin and white over the channel, filtering weak light through a thinning veil of mist. The air held stillness, not from calm, but from waiting. The bull had not moved in nearly an hour. His eyes stayed open, fixed toward the far side where the herd remained. They had not left. 5 shapes visible now, 3 more behind in partial shadow. Still. Silent. Musa stepped back from the slope. He'd seen what was building. The tremble that now ran in small waves through the elephant's shoulders. The slow repositioning of his trunk beneath him, curling inward, not for comfort, for leverage. The shift of ribs expanded with a breath so deep it pulled mud in with it. The body was preparing. Then, with no sound from the men, the bull moved. A push. First from the forelegs, he heaved forward, chest rising off the mud with a strain that forced a grunt from deep in his throat. His back legs shifted, but the pinned one slipped, and he crashed down hard onto his side. The impact cracked dried mud along his flank. His ear flapped once, wildly, then went still again. He didn't cry out, but his mouth opened, and for several seconds he lay there panting, foam curling along the corner of his jaw. The herd did not step closer. Musa crouched slightly, hands resting on his thighs, but didn't move toward him. This was his attempt, his failure, and maybe his next chance. The bull tried again. Another breath. Longer. Measured. He curled his trunk tighter under him, using the strength not for pulling, but for balance. His forelegs braced again. The right one shook violently, but he lifted. Groaning, not loud, but guttural, his shoulders rose first. The front of his body came off the earth. Then a long pause, chest heaving, sweat streaming through what was left of the dried mud. His back legs twitched. The injured one buckled. He staggered sideways, but he didn't fall. With one trembling shift, the rear leg straightened. Not fully, just enough. His whole body now quivered under the strain, ears sagging, trunk swaying. But he stood, 4 feet beneath him, wide set, unsteady, but holding. No one moved. Not Musa, not the other rangers, not the herd. The moment wasn't grand. It wasn't fast. It was the slow arrival of a choice fulfilled. The bull's head lowered, then lifted again. His gaze never left the far side. His ribs expanded with every breath now. No longer shallow, no longer desperate. Just slow, deep, and painful. But full. He didn't trumpet. He didn't move. He simply stood, chest broad, flanks gleaming wet in the early light, legs planted, as if relearning where ground existed beneath him. Across the channel, the matriarch shifted her weight. A young one flapped its ears once. Still no sound came. But they waited, and so did the men. The first step was slow and uneven, the back right leg dragging slightly before finding position. The bull stood just above the riverbank now, mud caked around his joints, ribs outlined under wet skin. No one had touched him since he rose. No rope, no sound, no guiding hands. The humans stayed behind, watching as the space between them widened. Not in distance, in choice. He didn't look back. He turned toward the river. The water moved low and slow in the morning light, no longer swollen, just steady. A shallow edge had formed near the bend, a natural crossing the herd had likely used before. The herd stood on the far bank, still unmoving. One of the smaller elephants had shifted forward slightly, front foot in the water, waiting, watching. The bull reached the edge and stopped. His trunk lowered and touched the surface. A brief ripple circled outward. Then, without pause, he stepped forward. First the left foot, firm and deliberate, then the right, dragging slower, breaking the water's tension as it sank. His shoulders dipped, and his legs vanished beneath the brown surface. But he did not stagger. The current pressed against his side, but he moved straight. Musa watched with a hand over his chest. One of the younger rangers murmured, "He's strong." No one replied. Halfway across, the bull paused. Not in fear, in effort. He stood, breathing hard, then moved again. The matriarch on the far bank shifted slightly, raising her head. The young calf stepped into the water and walked forward without hesitation. The bull climbed the final slope slowly, his breath heavy, each step measured. When he reached the dry patch where the others stood, the herd didn't crowd him. They didn't reach for him. They allowed the space. Then the youngest one, barely above his shoulder, stepped forward. It pressed its head against his side, brushing along the space just behind the ribs where the rope had pulled days before. The bull didn't respond immediately. He exhaled, slow and deep. Then turned his head slightly and let his trunk fall gently across the calf's back. No trumpet, no sound, just contact me. The others stepped closer, not all at once, one by one. The matriarch came last, standing at a distance. Her gaze met his. Then she turned, walking slowly into the brush. The rest followed, and the bull, without pause, followed them. His stride was imperfect. One leg dragged slightly, but he moved with them, not behind, not beside, but within. On the near bank, Musa remained still, hands at his sides. They hadn't saved him. They'd only given him time. The miracle wasn't in his rising, or the breath that returned in the rain. It was that, when he chose to walk again, he had somewhere to go. The river had changed again. A week after the rescue, the waterline had lowered, the current calm now. Pulled quietly through the bend like it had never risen at all. The slope where the bull had collapsed was dry, hardened by sun, the earth no longer loose or dangerous. Only a faint depression remained near the top of the bank, softened by time and shaped again by passing feet. No drag marks, no grooves from rope, no struggle, just tracks. Musa arrived early. He stepped down the ridge alone, boots pressing gently into the clay. The light was low but full, that pale, forgiving kind of morning where nothing felt rushed. He didn't carry gear. There was no need. The call from patrol had said only, "Fresh prints by the crossing. You might want to see for yourself." They hadn't sounded alarmed, just curious, but Musa had already guessed. The prints weren't from one elephant. They were from many. A group had passed here, recently. At least 6 or 7. The outer edges of the trail were wide and careful, the center marked by smaller steps, some pressed deeper than others. The kind of weight distribution that came from a calf staying close, leaning inward. Musa knelt by the largest print near the edge and placed his fingers along the back curve. It was clean, full, slightly deeper on the inside. A subtle drag from the rear heel, not enough to limp, just enough to mark. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. The last time he stood here, the earth had been slick with storm water, and the bull had lain nearly submerged, body still, skin cold. They had pulled with ropes until the mud surrendered. They had waited through the rain until their breath returned. They had not made him stand. That was his own. And now, this. There were no signs of distress, no signs of panic. The prints were orderly, calm. They entered from the north side, moved down the slope, and crossed clean through the river's edge. A shallow place now, firm enough to carry even a large bull without slipping. From the opposite bank, a faint trail curved west into the brush, the same direction the matriarch had taken that day when she led them away. Musa stood again. The air around him was cool, still. One bird called from the acacia above, then went quiet. He didn't speak at first, just watched the water move below him, slow and silver. There was no question whose tracks these were. The young bull had returned, not alone, but with the herd. He hadn't stayed near the site. He hadn't lingered or circled or left marks of uncertainty. He had passed through with others around him at his pace. Not rushed, not afraid. Just passing through like any wild thing would. He had not come back to remember. He had come back because this was part of his route now. Musa walked down to the water's edge. A few reeds bent sideways where the hooves had parted them. The river lapped gently at the edge, a quiet repetition of breath against earth. He reached out and picked up a dry stalk of grass, held it lightly between his fingers, and let it fall again. He had wondered, in the days after the rescue, whether the bull would find his way, whether the injury would heal, whether he would keep up with the others, or if they would slow for him. The wild did not wait for weakness. It did not offer rest. But some things were different. Some things stayed. Musa looked once more at the path, at the slight curve where smaller prints overlapped wider ones. He said nothing for several minutes. Then, finally, just above a whisper, that was where he belonged. He didn't need to follow. There would be other patrols, other crossings, other signs. But this one, this quiet line of movement through the place where a life had almost ended, was enough. He turned back toward the ridge. Behind him, the prints remained, and the water, slow and certain, carried on.